I was born in the 60s, the early 60s. It wasn't that long after the Second World War really, so all the toys we had, you know, it was Spitfires and toy soldiers and Airfix kits, and my parents took me to air shows and all that sort of stuff. So I guess from a very, very early age I had an interest in aircraft and history as well. Moving to the south coast here, where Supermarines actually was, you know, where they built Spitfires. The first flight was out of Eastleigh in Southampton. Mitchell actually lived there. We've also got Hubert Scott Payne, who actually started Supermarines up himself, so he was the forerunner for that. He was instrumental in doing the Schneider Trophy. And you know, all along the south coast here, the millions of people turned out to watch those events. It was just a huge thing, you know, the halcyon days of being faster, being better, going quicker, you know, all that sort of stuff.
We're a story-driven brand. That connects people to our watches. A lot of customers who, oh, my father was in the RAF, or my dad used to collect cafe racers, so I grew up around his garage. There's lots of connections on many different levels. What's really surprising is how many customers send us an email or call us up when they receive their watch. They're so excited. So when you tell a customer it's going to be there on Thursday, you should never take it for granted that it doesn't matter if it's a day late, because we know many people who have taken days off work, who are literally counting down the days till their watch is built and delivered.
This is where I was brought up from my early teens. Just down the road here there's Bosham Harbour, which is part of the Chichester Basin. And there's a certain spot down there where if it all gets a bit too much, you can go and take your lunch there, go down on a motorcycle and sit down on a bench down there and just look up towards Goodwood. You can see Goodwood aerodrome basically from there. And if the weather's right, you can see the Spitfires taking off. So it's just lovely to sit there and take it all in. The scenery's fantastic, you know, it's all by the water. So yeah, there's some very special places here in the Downs. And then of course we've got Goodwood just up the road. So to me, I guess that's the heart of motorsport really. It's such an amazing place.
Our brand name being Zero West, 0 degrees west, which is the prime meridian that runs through Greenwich. And from there, our brand DNA is that all watches have a date code and a latitude and longitude. They reference a moment in history, and then we research that moment in history and we bring the design attributes to the watch, to the dial, with as much authenticity as possible. We had a customer come in here to pick up an RAF watch whose father was in the RAF, bordering on tears. You realise that that's really important to them. We've just sold a watch to somebody for his 90th birthday, and then we had somebody's parents recently buying them their son's first watch for a 21st, and they asked if they could have serial number 21, which we were able to do, which was great. So it's really important that the research that we do and the people that do research for us as well, that's done properly. And so we won't just release a watch when the design is finished. Everything else has to be finished along with it.
I guess from the engineering side, that's my bread and butter, that's what I do. So my background is a mechanical design engineer, right from when I left college. I was fortunate to work for one of the blue chip companies who gave me a great training. Started off in a drawing office, on a drawing board, the old-fashioned way, and then worked on some really quite interesting projects, from confidential military projects. We were working on some stuff that I can't really talk about. After the Falklands thing came to an end, Rolls-Royce aero engines, I did some work on the Rolls-Royce Trent programs, which was very rewarding. So I've been very, very fortunate that most of the projects I've worked on have been interested and made a difference.
I've known Graham for probably 10 years. He's one of these irritating guys that can build his own house. And I'd always meet him every year at Christmas do, and he'd be telling me he wants to design a watch. And I'd never offered to help out because I thought he can do it all himself. And then what happened one Christmas, we didn't meet up, and he sent me a 3D render of a watch, just the metalwork. And he said, "Oh, what do you think?" And instead of emailing back, I thought, "Oh, I know what I'll do." I had the afternoon free. I'll design a dial. I designed him a logo with his name in it, and I put it all into an advert. It was very Breitling, with a chrome biplane with smoke, and I sent it back as an A4 advert, and I said, your watch design looks great. It could look like this. And he just emailed back one line saying, "Do you want to start a watch brand?" And it was a bit tongue-in-cheek, and I called him straight after, and I said, "Look, yeah, let's have a chat. I know you've always wanted to do a watch." And it became really apparent that what I could do, he couldn't do, and vice versa.
We happened upon the salvage. We managed to get the con rods from P9427 and also some engine smelt. We then went to the records. The records are quite extensive. Then the story started to unfold, and the more we looked into it, the more fascinating the story was. We took it to a good friend of ours in Tangmere. He very carefully took our precious engine melt and then smelted it to remove all the impurities he could, and then cast it into bars for us. We then had them turned down and then machined into small discs, sandblasted, and then laser engraved the back of them, and then put it under some sapphire glass. And then the rest of the watch then took shape. We knew we wanted to do an instrument-based dial, but we sketched it out. Andrew then worked all the design up.
When the story came to light about the S4, or the dogfight over Poole Bay, it was too good an opportunity not to take that and research it further and see what we could find out. You go on a whole journey of research, and what we found was a lot of the dials through the Spitfires, all the different marks of Spitfires over the time that they were built, were all very similar. The typography changed very slightly. It became quite clear I was going to have to generate the typeface from scratch. And it was quite a long process. There are certain things, aspects to some of the twos where they're curved, to replicate that on the computer. So the airspeed indicator we've actually got on the watch is quite an accurate representation of the one that you'd actually find from the cockpit dial.
The plane itself was lost in the Battle of Britain on the hardest day, so it was a monumental day and probably a turning point in the War of the Air. Alex Goder had bailed out, and the plane nosed into the marshes off the Essex coast and Falmouth Island. It buried itself in fairly deep, and then in the 90s it was dug up effectively by some archaeologists, and we were lucky to obtain a part of that. The dial itself, again, we were looking at the instrument panel that the pilot would have actually seen to find a suitable dial, and we thought about the slip turn indicator and then thought again about the slip turn indicator. It's such a wacky sort of design for a dial. We were umming and ahhing whether we should actually put that out. But we did the prototypes for it, we had some mock-ups done, and then we thought, yeah, it worked. The watch strap is such an important part of the watch. So we went to some of the large manufacturers. None of them were really substantial enough for the watches. Our watches are fairly chunky. I had an idea of what I wanted, which was a pretty substantial strap. So I said to Andrew, I'm going to have a go at trying to make some. I tried and tried and tried. The sewing was difficult, getting the consistency right. But probably after about 6 or 7 months of literally daily trying and different things and getting new tools, and I suddenly got that under my belt really, and then started to produce our signature straps. And each one takes several hours to make to see it through from start to finish. But I do love doing it. It is a calming process really. But you have to be very consistent with it. Every stitch has to be pulled and biased the same way, same tension. But that just comes with practice, you know.
We had a couple of customers come down from Manchester a couple of months ago, and that was a long journey. That took them, well over half a day to get here. They stayed for 3 or 4 hours. We took them for lunch. They bought a couple of watches, and then they trekked it back. And next week I've got a customer coming over from Cardiff, and they're staying over the night. And that happened with another customer recently. And for them, it's all part of the experience. And we're very privileged to be able to retell these stories that are really important and connect people with watches that mean more to them just than telling the time.
Watches are so fascinating and fantastic because everything's in miniature. The screws are tiny. I've got M1, M1.2 screws in them, which are unbelievable. You think how you can make things like that. Probably the most complex thing that you own mechanically is your car, but the next most complex thing that you can actually own and be close to is your Swiss movement mechanical watch, and they're beating away day in, day out, and we're giving them shock and vibration and different temperatures, and you think that they're accurate to within a few seconds a day. It's just a marvel really, especially ones that have got a piece of history in them as well. Maybe not everybody knows it's in there, but when you actually wear it, it's quite a special thing, that you're actually wearing a piece of history and can resonate with that particular story.
We've got a guy that walks his dog every day, pays off a couple of £100, puts it in the safe, hasn't had the watch yet. A couple of months ago, he paid it off over like 8 months of lockdown. And it meant the world to him. He was beside himself. And then we've got another guy who turned up the other day for his third watch in his McLaren. Lovely bloke too. So we've got real spectrums. I know that if I was spending £3,000 on a watch, I might have saved up. It might be a big deal for me. We've had a customer who said, I've never spent £3 on a watch before in my life. I just can't decide which one to get. And I said, well, come in. And he came in, and for us, it's not about selling. I would hate to think somebody was trying to sell them something. And quite often, if there's a husband and wife here, and he goes, what do you think? I try and keep it neutral because, it's not 20 quid. It's a lot of money. And so, for me, somebody going away really happy with what they want, or if they don't go away with a watch, I'm happy with that too.
The people, the stories, those great moments in history, in British history, I'd like them to be remembered. They're very limited editions, so there's 100 pieces typically in an edition. So we're trying to appeal to 100 people around the world that resonate with that story, if you like. The bravery and the sacrifice that these guys actually gave us so we could live the lives we live today ourselves,
So we had a customer come in recently who bought a watch, a longitude watch, one of our birth watches, and never spent that sort of money on a watch before. He lived local. Anyway, I didn't hear from him, and I phoned him up. And I remember when he was in here, he said to me, with his wife, joking, she's allowed me to have a watch if I take her on holiday, because she was always moaning that he was too tight to buy a watch. And she said, you can buy the watch, and if you buy the watch, you can take me on holiday. That's the trade-off. And he goes, okay, I'll buy the watch. I've been meaning to do it for years and years. So I phoned him, didn't hear from him. And I knew where he lived, well, from his address. And I went round there with a letter, and I put it through his letterbox saying, I've been trying to get hold of you just to let you know your watch is ready. Didn't hear anything for another month. And I thought, well, maybe he's not very well, he's gone away. And then he came to the door one day, and he said, "I've come to pick up my watch." And I said, "Oh, here it is." And he said, "Oh, sorry I haven't been in touch." And I said, "Oh, that's fine." And he said, "Oh, I'll treasure this always." And I said, "Oh, well, now you can take your wife on holiday." And he said, "Oh, she passed away." And he said to me, "I will look at this every day and think of her." And for me, that kind of encapsulated what designing a watch was all about. And as he left, I watched him walk down the road. And I just thought, yeah, time's short. You just got to make the most of what you can when you can.